It's really hot in my room today because I don't have the air conditioning on, and I'm deliberately keeping the air conditioning turned off in order to preserve power. You know, I did a similar thing when it was still cold outside where I live with the heating. I would just keep the heating turned off for most of the year, and the reason I was doing this was because I could get about the same level of comfort from just wearing a ton of warm clothes inside. And so, you know, you're not paying a bunch of extra money just to get that heating going through and to be able to wear less, you know, uncomfortable clothes. You can wear something more casual or just have your clothes off, which is like what I do most of the time. You know, most of the time when I'm in this room, I either have my shirt off or I have more than just my shirt off, and that's kind of how I like to be. I find that a lot of the fabric in clothes is really overstimulating or uncomfortable for me, and so I generally prefer just to not wear any of them at all. But I also think that I have kind of strange taste in clothes because, with that being said, I really like winter clothes. You know, I'm not a clothes guy, I'm not a big fan of clothes, but I really like, you know, the fluffy jackets and the big waterproof gear and the various other forms of insulation that you're gonna utilize when it's cold outside. I like that stuff a lot, and it seems like, you know, I get to have it during a certain time of year, but not so much during other times. So when the summer comes around, unless it's like 100 degrees outside, I think that's 40 Celsius for everybody else in the world. Um, I'm not going to do math right now. You know, when it's that temperature outside, obviously you're going to have to put the AC on, or at least me. Uh, I don't I don't have that like third world person type of sensibility, because I'm white. But you know, some people, you know, they're able to just bear through it, and props to those guys. You guys are real ones. I don't have that kind of strength, but um, you know, I'm in this situation now where I'm preserving heat, and I'm preserving cold, I guess. Uh, and the only reason I have a light turned on in my room is because I'm talking to you guys. Otherwise, I just wouldn't have a light turned on. It's this kind of like incessant desire I have to preserve as much power as possible, to save as much money as possible. Like, even with relatively minuscule things, like the lights being on, I will just sit in the dark for the entire day. Like, I'll be walking around the apartment and turning lights off if I notice that one of them gets left on. Um, you know, that's one of the other reasons why it seems advantageous to sell these video games, because you know, CRTs use up a lot of electricity. So regardless of the fact that I'm more into language learning now than I ever was into video games, and the fact that I don't really use this stuff, I also can't really use this stuff because I'm trying to save money by not using power. And obviously, you know, video game sets as well as TV sets use a lot of power. So it's not like conservation conscious, right? To be, especially playing a lot of the older stuff. Um, and that's kind of the mindset that I'm in these days, right? I'm very like squarely focused on not spending really any money. It's trying to spend as little money as possible, and it's simultaneously because I am poor, but also because even if I weren't poor, I just wouldn't want to spend money. Like why spend the extra money? You've got to ask yourself that, right? You can make a couple sacrifices to your immediate comfort to have more money in your bank account, right? To have more money in your savings account. And I think this actually gets into a broader conversation about the way that Americans spend their money. I think there's this like prioritization of so many immediate comforts that are actually unnecessary in our culture. Look at the fact that people are willing to keep the AC on all summer, or they're willing to keep the heat on all winter. You don't actually have to do these things, right? If you want fresh air, you can just open a window, right? But these things are kind of like not prioritized, and it's a little odd to me, the insistence on going to the grocery store once every 2 weeks or once every week and a half makes sense, because a lot of people don't live near grocery stores necessarily, and you want to conserve gas by not having to drive back and forth. So that actually is economical. But my problem with, that is more to do with like how we've actually chose to build the cities. We've chose to build the cities in a way that is not geared towards human life. We've chose to build the places where people actually live in an unlivable way, and an unsustainable way too, as far as the environment is concerned, because oil is finite, it's not infinite, and other natural resources are finite as well, including the ones that are used to make electric cars. The actual solution to these problems is density, to have mass transit networks and to have people living very close together. But we have become accustomed to this kind of decadent way of life, which prioritizes individual comfort and individual freedom, quote unquote, over the over quality of life, really. That's the ironic thing about this, is that we would have a better quality of life if everyone lived closer together, if everyone was more willing to be stingy with their money and to tighten their belts a bit, and to not, live entirely off of things like credit card debt, right? I mean, the degree to which people who are making $100,000 a year are willing to just finance their debt is crazy. Like, they get a credit card, and then they get a loan, and then they get 100 different things on layaway, 2 different cars on layaway. They've got their 30-year mortgage, which wouldn't even be legal in most countries. They've got their various 8K televisions throughout different rooms that they're paying off of layaway. They're buying their food on a credit card, and at the end of every month, they come up short, right? They live paycheck to paycheck. Totally unnecessary. They don't need any of this stuff. None of this stuff is making them happy. And of course, because they feel unhappy, they take out that feeling of unhappiness on their spouse by drinking a bottle of Jack Daniels and smoking weed, which was just recently legalized in their state, beating their wife, and then, spending the rest of the money on their credit card limit for that month on sports betting websites and online casinos. This is the alienated existence that these people are living in. And it's even worse in Canada than it is in the US, with the extremely alienated middle class that they have there. It's like this North American culture towards money is completely insane, right? Like, the attitude that we have towards this stuff is not rational. And I think it's partially because we have credit scores, which basically encourages people to envelop themselves in this manipulative financial system that is constantly trying to tempt you to spend over your limit. other countries don't have credit scores. Um, you need one in order to have a car, in order to have a house, in order to even rent a place a lot of the time. You need a credit score to do so many different things. So in North America, there are these incentives to actually get credit cards and to keep an active line of credit going. But then also at the same time, they try to tempt you with all these, points and kickbacks and different things that you really have to watch yourself over. And the most financially successful people are people that have credit cards, but they just use it to buy the things that are within their budget, and they pay it off right away, and they don't, spend anything else. And they're saving massive amounts of money in a savings account, and then they have an investments account that they're putting towards things that make sense, that are thought through, and then maybe they have like 10% or whatever of their disposable income going to more risky stuff like crypto or something. But we're not really having conversations about how to build wealth. I think that a lot of people aren't even really taught about financial literacy or about how to be more responsible with one's finances. And so there's like this weird hedonistic culture of just spending as much money as possible, and not really, ever sacrificing one's immediate comfort in pursuit of something greater, in pursuit of saving money, to have a nest egg for yourself in the future. We're not even really talking about that stuff. And so you have a lot of people talking about themselves like they're living paycheck to paycheck, in some cases because they literally are, but they don't have to be, They're complaining about how difficult things have gotten with egg prices or something like that, when, the price of eggs slightly rising shouldn't even bother you given how much money you're making. You're just spending it in the stupidest of ways every month, And so it's crazy, the financial culture we live in. It's really crazy. And that's to say nothing about the prevalence of lotto tickets in especially poorer communities, which really prey on the impulsivity and lack of hope that exist in those communities, lower IQs in a lot of cases as well. This is a terrible system, and it could change if it were to fundamentally change, right? I know I just repeated myself with that sentence, but like what I mean to say is, if we fundamentally changed this economic system, people's mindsets with respect to their, not just their money, but like their lives as a whole would also change. If we became a country which was more focused on shared spaces, which was more focused on community, which was more focused on making sure that everybody had like a baseline amount of security and protection from predatory corporations, we would be able to start focusing on bigger things like, going into outer space, like protecting the environment and endangered species, like being able to develop the products and medicines of the future that could benefit future generations, and technology for that matter, right? But we're having these fights over insignificant culture war issues to basically distract people from the fact that they are extremely alienated from the world around them due to the fact that they're living in a predatory economic system that tells them to prioritize these hedonistic pleasures that aren't increasing their meaning in life overall, that are not, bringing them closer to those around them, that only serve as a distraction from the painful existence that they have working for someone else who doesn't respect them and doesn't care about them, and that constantly shoves, different forms of hedonism in their face. It's why I'm not even, totally opposed to the idea of Trump's tariffs, at least, from one perspective, right? If we were to tariff all the different things coming into this country from around the world, maybe then it would reduce Americans' reliance on these short-term pleasures, this hedonism. If it were no longer sustainable for them to buy products that are bound to break in about a year only to replace them again from Temu and Amazon and AliExpress, maybe we could start having a conversation about who we are as a country, right? The fact that we have in many cases sacrificed our freedom and our economic security and our sense of community for short-term hits of dopamine in the form of cheap products, gambling, and drugs, the increased liberalization of drugs that we've seen in this country. I don't think any of these things are good, right? And I'm not even against, the legalization of something like drugs, but what I am against is the normalization of them, in communities which have been alienated from one another and forgotten, by the government, by a government which once saw their needs and attended to them. We don't have that anymore. We don't have a government of action that fights for working families. We have a government of action, but it exists entirely to line the pockets of robber barons and oligarchs. And you see that in the destruction of the little bit of social safety net that we have that's going on right now from this current administration. And this is at the same time that they're rewarding contracts and massive amounts of government money to billionaires in the form of, SpaceX or what have you. So, I mean, just the other day, it was like, what, $500 million that was given to Tesla for the military, so they could put armored Teslas in their inventory. I mean, it's just insane, right? Some of this stuff is just insane. But I think we need to be having a serious conversation about who we are as a country and what we're willing to take. And my fear is, at the end of all of this, after all of these, crazy economic proposals go through, we're just going to elect the other party who is going to reinstate free trade agreements, bring back the massively cheap products, and do some tweaks around the edges in the form of putting more money towards the very basic social safety net we have, and then not doing anything else, not fundamentally changing the economy, which is what I think we need. I think we need to be willing to pay higher prices for certain things if we have the understanding that it is in service of a greater economic program that fundamentally changes the lives of the American people by lifting them up out of poverty, by creating public works programs, dense cities with heavily subsidized transit, etc. But I don't think anyone has that kind of vision. I don't think anyone is talking about changing our infrastructure to not just be crumbling, but to bring us closer together, right? And part of the reason why we're not having that conversation is because most Americans don't support that. Most Americans are too individualistic. They want their big F-150s that they can easily kill somebody with. I know, because I've almost, gotten ran over by those things multiple times. They want to be able to have all of their huge, crazy guns, regardless of how many people, including children, a year die as a result of them. They want to be able to have, their heavily processed foods with cancer-causing chemicals in them that the rest of the world doesn't allow because individualism or something. And they want to be able to waste all of their money on gambling, sports betting, and marijuana. You know, they want to live in these kind of paranoid communities where all the houses are spread apart from one another and you're not making eye contact with your neighbors, and when you drive through the city, it's, you know, you're in this fortified vehicle that acts as a kind of fortress from the elements around you, and meanwhile, you know, the small businesses suffocate and the downtowns die because nobody's walking through them anymore. They want all of that, right? They want to live apart from one another and to have this paranoid kind of new world settler mindset, you know. And it's terrible, right? Like, it's our approach to one another is terrible. But it's the approach that we have. And I didn't even mean to talk about that in this video. I wanted to just talk about my various ways of saving money, my foray into the extreme elements that Mother Nature has to offer. But I ended up thinking about, you know, the broader financial consequences of how we have chose to organize this society, and how unorthodox, you know, my approach is in the context of that society. I find that interesting. No, things need to change. We need to become more like other, more rational countries, but I just don't think we ever will. And so, for those of us who are dissatisfied with this way of life, the only option really is to leave, and that's what I intend to do. I don't like the culture of North America as much as, you know, I am a product of it, and there are things about it that I like. The overall, you know, overall what it represents, I don't like that. I find that alienating, and I want it to change. But I don't think I'm going to be an agent of change in that, just thinking realistically, and so I'm going to go fuck off to Spain.